Denver, Colorado, December 23rd. A woman stands alone in a glass elevator watching her family celebrate without her. I am Leah Randall, and the silence of my phone screams louder than the city wind biting at the glass. My parents smile from a glowing dinner table in Oregon, every seat taken the golden sun in the center. They erased me from the holiday, but they didn't forget the bill. A $32,000 demand landed in my inbox moments later. They treated me like an ATM with a pulse, assuming I would pay for the privilege of being ignored. But they forgot that I analyze risk for a living, and I was about to buy their debt. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The silence of a corporate elevator on December 23rd is a specific kind of lonely. It was just me, the hum of the cables, and the smell of industrial floor wax. I was 28 floors up, in a downtown Denver high-rise, watching the numbers tick down while clutching a bag of lukewarm takeout. Outside, the wind was whipping through the concrete canyons, biting and bitter, but inside the air was stale, recycled from 1,000 tired sighs. I was tired too. Being a cybersecurity incident responder meant the holidays were just high-risk periods for phishing scams and server attacks. While the world slept or celebrated, I watched the walls. My phone lit up in my palm, vibrating against the silence. It was a notification from the Randall family group chat, a thread I had muted 6 months ago for my own sanity, but somehow it always climbed back to the top of my feed. I swiped it open, expecting a generic Merry Christmas meme or a request for tech support. Instead, it was a photo. It was my parents' dining room back in Oregon. The table was glowing under the warm yellow light of the chandelier I had paid to replace 2 years ago. Mom and Dad sat at opposite ends, looking flushed and happy. My younger brother Tyler was in the center, flanked by cousins and their spouses. The table was groaned under the weight of a feast: ham rolls, the good china. Every single seat was taken. There were elbows touching, smiles wide and easy. Then I read the caption from my dad: "First Christmas with everyone home again." I froze. The elevator doors slid open to the lobby, but I didn't move. I zoomed in on the image, panning across the table, looking for a gap. There was no open chair, no extra plate set aside in hope. It wasn't just that they hadn't invited me, it was that the tableau was complete without me. It was like they had tried to Photoshop me out of the family narrative entirely. I was the glitch they had finally patched. I stepped out into the lobby, the city noise rushing in as the doors closed behind me, cutting off the quiet. I scrolled down, looking for a separate message. Surely there would be a private text. A "wish you were here," or even a "sorry it's so last minute." Nothing. Just the photo and the silence where my name should be. I swallowed the lump in my throat, a familiar acidic taste. I was used to being the afterthought, but being invisible was a new kind of cold. Then another notification pinged, an email from Dad. The subject line read, "Auto loan, urgent." The whiplash nearly made me trip over my own boots. I opened it right there in the middle of the lobby. Attached was a PDF statement for a past-due truck loan. The balance was $32,000. The primary borrower was Tyler Randall. The co-borrowers were Michael and Carol Randall. 3 missed payments. Repossession pending. My dad's note in the body of the email was exactly one line. Handle this before the end of the month. No greeting. No please. No acknowledgement that he had just publicly celebrated a holiday without me. I felt ambushed. To them, I wasn't a daughter. I was a wallet with a pulse. The wind outside hit me like a physical blow, triggering a cascade of memories I usually kept locked behind a firewall. I remembered high school smelling like diner grease because I worked nights to pay for Tyler's club football fees. I remembered the acceptance letter to a university in Boston that I crumpled up and threw away because Tyler blew out his knee and someone had to drive him to physical therapy while Mom and Dad worked. I remembered sitting in a pew at church listening to my parents tell the congregation about everything they had sacrificed for Tyler's dreams, never once mentioning that I was the one who had been sacrificed alongside them. I had become the default problem solver, The peacekeeper, the unofficial third parent trained to hold the structural integrity of the family together so they never had to sit with discomfort. By the time I got to my apartment, I was shaking, and not just from the cold. My place was small, tidy, and quiet. Secondhand furniture, a laptop open on my desk displaying a cybersecurity dashboard, sticky notes, organized by incident timelines. I had built a life here around resilience and independence. I had a solid job, a few good friends, and Jared, a boyfriend who respected my boundaries because he saved lives as an EMT and understood what trauma looked like. I valued my freedom, but the tug of duty was a hook set deep in my jaw. My phone buzzed again. A text from Tyler. "Just pay it, Leah. Dad's freaking and Mom's stressed. Don't make it a big thing. It's not like you can't afford it." Those words hit me like a slap across the face. Not like you can't afford it. As if my hard work was a natural resource they held the mining rights to. As if I existed solely to absorb their damage. I looked at the Christmas photo again. Everyone home. Then the email. "Handle this. We don't need you," my internal monologue whispered, "but we need your money." I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. The screen glowed with the familiar comfort of my work. Incident response. That was my job. The methodology was ingrained in me: assess, contain, remediate, prevent. I spent my days dissecting cyber attacks and fraud. I knew how systems failed. I knew who really paid the price when security was breached. For years, my family had treated me like an incident response team, on retainer, always on call, never compensated, and threatened with emotional termination any time I hesitated. I pulled up the loan details on the bank's portal. I needed to verify the breach. I scanned the document looking for my signature, my social security number, any trace of my legal obligation. My name was nowhere. Legally, I owed nothing. It wasn't my mess. My thumb hovered over my phone. My heart hammered against my ribs. Years of conditioning screamed at me to just pay it, to keep the peace, to buy their love for another few months. But the image of that full table with no space for me burned behind my eyes. I opened a blank document and typed a short response. "I am not on this loan. I did not sign this contract. I will not pay this balance." I hit send. As I closed the laptop, the black screen reflected my own face back at me. That was the moment my parents tried to erase me. They just didn't know I was about to write myself back in. The morning after sending the email, I didn't wait for the fallout. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank's customer service line. My voice was calm, my questions clinical. I needed absolute confirmation, recorded on a line somewhere in a server farm, that I was clear. The representative, a tired-sounding woman named Brenda, confirmed it after 3 security questions. I wasn't a borrower. I wasn't a guarantor. Legally, the Randall family debt had nothing to do with me. I hung up, staring at the gray city skyline. I was legally free, but emotionally, they had already assigned the debt to me. In their minds, the invoice was mine, simply because I was the only one capable of paying it. That's when the idea took root. It started as a professional observation and bloomed into something darker. In my line of work, I saw how delinquent loans were bundled and sold off to debt buyers for pennies on the dollar. It was a cold mathematical ecosystem. I already had a mechanism for it: Randall Risk Solutions LLC. It was a small shell I used for side consulting gigs to keep my liabilities separate from my personal assets. I could have just walked away. I could have let the bank grind them down with robocalls and credit hits. But a sharper thought clawed its way up from my gut. What if I didn't just watch the system work? What if I owned the system? I needed a sanity check, so I met Naomi for coffee at a place downtown strung with premature Christmas lights. I told her everything: the photo, the demand, the way they treated me like a line item in their budget. "I feel like I've been sacrificed on the altar of the golden sun," I said, gripping my cup until my knuckles turned white. Naomi looked at me over the rim of her mug. "You don't have to let them ambush you forever, Leah, but be careful. Revenge changes people. It's radioactive." Later, Jared was even gentler, but his warning hit harder. We were in my kitchen and he held my shoulders, looking me dead in the eye. Just don't let this family mess turn you into what you hate in them. Don't become a bully just because you were bullied. I nodded, pretending to agree. But late that night, while Jared slept, I opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for peace, I was looking for leverage. I messaged a contact at a debt-buying firm, Rosa Kim. We'd worked cases together where financial fraud overlapped with cybercrime. I kept it professional, asking her to flag a specific auto loan if it hit the distressed asset lists. I gave her the loan number and the bank name, playing it cool, like it was just another piece of data for a case. I knew this wasn't neutral, this was intention. I was choosing to become the one who could threaten consequences instead of the one absorbing them. A few days after Christmas, Rosa emailed me back. Your LLC can pick up that truck loan at 46% of the remaining balance. Interested, I stared at the number on the screen. For less than half of what my parents had demanded I pay, I could become the creditor. I didn't hesitate. I signed the paperwork through Randall Risk Solutions LLC. I wired the funds. The bank transferred the note. My company now owned my family's debt. Repossession day arrived with a surreal duality. I was sitting at my sleek, quiet desk in Denver, sipping sparkling water, while 800 miles away, my childhood driveway was descending into chaos. I knew it was happening because Mom texted me a photo. It was a blurry, frantic shot of Tyler's blue pickup truck, half loaded onto a flatbed tow truck. In the background, Tyler was shouting, his face twisted, and Dad was on his phone screaming at someone off camera. I could see the neighbors' blinds tilted. The community was watching. The text accompanying the photo was desperate. They're taking Tyler's truck. Your father says this is your doing. Please fix it. I felt a wave of nausea, but right behind it was a small, hard flicker of satisfaction. I didn't reply. That evening, the narrative completely slipped from their control. Naomi sent me a link to a video posted in a hometown Facebook group. The shaky clip showed my dad yelling at the repo agent in the driveway. My daughter will handle this. This is a mistake. You tell your boss to call Leah Randall. The repo agent, a heavy-set guy who looked like he'd heard it all before, just kept securing the chains. Talk to your lender, buddy. I just drive the truck. Hearing the language of my professional world land in the driveway where I learned to ride a bike was jarring. But then the direct attacks started. Dad bombarded my phone. The texts weren't questions, they were indictments. After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us. You're going to make us look like trash. It crystallized for me then. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about the truck. It was about reputation. He didn't care that they were stealing from me. He cared that the neighbors saw the consequences. The next morning, I was reviewing logs when my office receptionist messaged me. There's a couple here claiming to be your parents, and a younger guy. They're upset. Security wants to know if they can come up. My heart rate spiked, thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stared at the message. My parents had always ambushed me in private, where the silence of our home protected them. This time they had brought the war to my world. I took a breath, smoothing my shirt. Put them in the conference room, I typed back. The conference room was a fishbowl, a sleek rectangle of glass and brushed steel overlooking the Denver skyline. Beyond the transparent walls, my coworkers walked past with exaggerated casualness, pretending not to stare at the domestic disaster unfolding inside. I took a breath and stepped in. My dad, Michael, was already standing at the head of the table as if he owned the building. My mom, Carol, sat to his right, wringing her hands in her lap, looking at the floor. Tyler was slouching against the far wall, his eyes red-rimmed and furious, radiating the petulant energy of a prince denied his crown. We need to talk about what you've done. Dad started, his voice booming in the acoustically treated room. It wasn't a question. It was an indictment. He didn't ask how I was or why I hadn't called. He launched straight into the attack. He blamed me for the repossession, for the embarrassment, for the gossip spreading like wildfire through our church back home. This is not how family behaves, he thunders, slamming a hand on the mahogany table. dragging our good name through the mud because you're too selfish to help. I didn't stand. I sat at the opposite end of the table, folding my hands over a manila folder. Family doesn't forget to invite their daughter to Christmas and then send her a $32,000 bill, I said. My voice was quiet, but in the silence of the room, it cut like a razor. I spelled out the timeline for them, ticking the points off on my fingers. Their choice to exclude me from the photo. Their choice to ignore me until they needed money. Their choice to demand I pay for a truck I'd never driven. You didn't just forget me, I told them, meeting my father's gaze. You tried to erase me and still cash me in. Tyler snapped, pushing himself off the wall. You always hated me, he spat. You're just jealous. You're jealous because they care more about me and my dreams than your boring life. You're using your money to punish us. For a split second, I was 16 again, watching him get new cleats while I wore holes in my sneakers, working double shifts. I flashed back to covering for his screw-ups, lying to teachers, smoothing over his tantrums, while he was praised as talent, and I was merely responsible. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who had never been allowed to fail. I'm not jealous of being the reason Dad drinks and Mom cries, I said coldly. I'm tired of being the one you all push in front of every moving train. I opened the folder and slid a printed article across the long table. It was a piece from a tech journal about my cybersecurity company's recent funding round, listing me as a key early hire with significant stock options. Dad picked it up, squinting at the text. I explained that this was the little computer job they had mocked for years. This was why they assumed I could cover five-figure emergencies like loose change. You never asked who I became, I said. You just calculated how much I could bail you out. Mom looked up, her face pale. Is it true? She whispered. The bank. They said the loan was sold to a company tied to you. Something about risk solutions. I didn't flinch. Yes. Randall Risk Solutions owns your debt. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crack the glass. I laid it out clinically, dissecting the situation the way I would a malware attack. They signed the loan. They missed the payments. The bank sold the distressed asset. My company bought it legally, cleanly, and without emotion. I didn't create your hole, I said. I just stopped standing at the bottom holding you up. Michael leaned forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register I remembered from my childhood, the tone that preceded a storm. You will sell that loan. You will pay whatever it takes to fix this. Then we move on. The command triggered a tremor in my hands. Years of obedience, of fearing his disapproval, of dreading the exile of his cold silence rushed back. I felt the old fear gripping my throat. But then I looked at the city outside, the life I had built without them, and I realized the fear didn't own me anymore. No, I said. It was simple, flat, and final. He blinked, stunned, and demanded I repeat myself. I am not selling it, I said, my voice gaining strength. I am not erasing the consequences. You can pay, you can negotiate, or you can default. Those are your choices. I'm not sacrificing my future so you can pretend you never messed up. How can you do this? Mom's voice cracked, tears finally spilling over. How is putting your own parents through collections any better? We're your parents, Leah. He's your brother. You were my parents when you let me be ambushed by a repo truck instead of inviting me to dinner. I shot back, the anger finally breaking through the professional veneer. You were my parents when you sacrificed me so Tyler never had to grow up. I listed the receipts I had carried in my head for a decade, co-signing a loan I had to pay off to save my credit, giving up my apartment deposit to cover their rent, paying that medical bill, just this once. Michael stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. If you go through with this, he snarled, pointing a finger at my face, you're no daughter of mine. I stood up too, meeting him eye to eye. I stopped being your daughter the day you decided my only value was my bank account. You just finally said it out loud. They left. Tyler threw me a look of pure, unadulterated hatred and muttered, "You'll regret this," as he stormed out. I watched the heavy glass door swing shut, sealing the silence back inside. I stood there alone in the room I commanded. Maybe I would regret it, but for the first time in my life, the regret would be mine. It wouldn't be something my family assigned to me like another unpaid bill. The machine I had set in motion rolled on without pity. From my laptop in Denver, I authorized Randall Risk Solutions to send the standard collections letters. They were masterpieces of impersonal bureaucracy, drafted in the clinical language I had helped write for corporate clients. They listed balances, statutory deadlines, and payment options. There was no anger in the font, no screaming in the margins. Just the cold, hard math of consequence landing in my parents' mailbox day after day. Information from my hometown has a way of leaking out, usually through the cracks of gossip. Through a combination of Naomi's network and cryptic texts from my mother, I learned how the debt was finally being settled. For the first time in the history of the Randall family, the sacrifices weren't mine. Michael had to cash out a significant chunk of his 401k, taking a tax penalty that must have made him grind his teeth. Tyler, stripped of his Golden Boy armor, was forced to sell his gaming setup and his beloved motorcycle. I heard he even picked up a second job stocking shelves at the hardware store. For once, they were the ones selling off pieces of their comfort to clean up their own mess. But the war wasn't contained to our bank accounts. An anonymized version of the story appeared on a local community Facebook page, and from there it jumped to a popular Reddit forum on family drama. I sat in my apartment scrolling through hundreds of comments under the thread titled, "My daughter bought our son's debt and let his truck get repossessed." The internet was tearing itself apart over my life. Half the commenters called the daughter a monster, a cold-hearted, vindictive witch who valued money over blood. The other half cheered her on as a boundary-setting hero. It was a microcosm of the American condition, the clash between the ideal of unconditional family loyalty and the necessity of individual survival. Reading strangers dissect my morality made me realize that the same fault lines running through the comment section were running through my own heart. I carried a moral hangover into therapy that week. I sat on the beige couch and admitted the ugliest truth. I had watched the video of the repossession twice, and I had felt a small, sharp satisfaction. Did I go too far? I asked, staring at the ceiling. Did I become the villain in their story? My therapist didn't coddle me. She reframed it simply. I had enforced a boundary using the tools I understood. They had weaponized guilt. I had weaponized the law. But she reminded me that only I could decide if the motive sat right with my soul. I leaned heavily on the community I had chosen rather than the one I was born into. Jared and Naomi showed up for me in ways that didn't require invoices. We had movie nights where we turned off our phones. We cooked dinner together in my small kitchen, the air filling with garlic and laughter. One night while chopping vegetables, Jared stopped and looked at me. "I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, Leah," he said quietly. "But don't carry shame that isn't yours to hold. You aren't them." It was a stark reminder of what family actually looked like, people who fed you, not people who consumed you. Then came the call. It was a Tuesday evening when my phone buzzed with Mom's number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I answered. Her voice was subdued, stripped of the hysteria and drama that usually defined our interactions. "We've paid it," Carol said. "Your company sent the confirmation. The truck is done." I waited. "Your father says we're finished with you," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "He says he doesn't have a daughter anymore." I looked out at the city lights blurring in the distance. "He hasn't treated me like one in years, Mom." There was a long silence on the line, heavy with unsaid things. Then her voice cracked. "I'm ashamed, Leah. Not just of the truck, of that Christmas picture. I look at it now on the mantel, and all I can see is the empty space where you should be. We chose comfort over you. We wanted a happy holiday, so we pretended you didn't exist." It was the first time my mother had ever admitted it. They had tried to erase me for the sake of an easier narrative. I listened, stunned, feeling the weight of the admission settle in my chest. "I don't expect you to forgive us," she said. "Maybe someday. Maybe we can meet. Just us. Somewhere neutral. To hear who you are now. I don't want the last real conversation we ever had to be about a truck. I didn't rush to comfort her. I didn't offer a platitude. I sat with the reality of what she was asking. If I ever want that too, I'll let you know, I said. It wasn't a reconciliation, but it wasn't a door slammed shut either. I hung up. A few minutes later, a final text came through from her. Your father is changing some paperwork. I think the will. He says he's making sure you can't hurt us again. I stared at the screen. I thought about legacy. I'd already been written out of their hearts, I thought. Paperwork just made it official. I wondered what it meant to build a life where legacy wasn't about what you inherited, but about who you decided to stand with when the bill finally came due. Months later, the most startling thing about my life was the quiet. My phone, once a grenade waiting to go off with emergency bills and panicked guilt trips, sat still on my desk. At first, the lack of notifications felt like phantom limb pain, a nervous tick, where I checked for crises that weren't there. But as the winter thawed into a muddy Colorado spring, the silence shifted. It stopped feeling like the punishment of exile my father had intended, and started feeling like a fortress I had successfully defended. It was space vast and clean, and for the first time, it belonged entirely to me. I filled that space with things that actually grew. I secured a promotion at work, moving from incident response to a strategic oversight role. I used the extra income and time to start mentoring a coding club for high school girls. On Tuesdays, I sat in a library basement with teenagers who were too smart for their own good, teaching them Python and encryption. But beneath the syntax and logic gates, I was teaching them something else, subtly channeling my own history into lessons about how to protect their digital footprints, how to value their input, and how to ensure they didn't disappear just because a louder voice entered the room. I was helping other eldest daughters build firewalls around their lives before they ever needed them. My relationship with Jared deepened too. It wasn't a romance novel rescue. He didn't save me from my family, and I didn't need him to. We built something grounded in mutual respect and clear, hard boundaries. We spent our weekends hiking or cooking, existing in a partnership where no was a complete sentence and money was never a weapon. We hosted holidays with a patchwork group of friends, coworkers, neighbors, people who had drifted away from their own toxic origins. We ate potluck dinners on mismatched plates, laughing over inside jokes, creating a community that felt more like family than the bloodline I had severed. Carol, my mother, still texted occasionally. She stuck strictly to the terms of the unspoken treaty we had established. She sent photos of the Oregon rain, the dog sleeping on the porch, or the changing leaves in the backyard. There were no emotional demands, no requests for money, no updates on Dad's bitterness or Tyler's job. I responded, sometimes keeping my replies short but kind. We orbited each other at a safe distance, two satellites aware of the massive crater between us, neither willing to risk the gravity of getting too close. One bitter evening in late January, I found myself walking along the river path in Denver. The air was sharp enough to hurt my lungs, and the water was black and rushing. I thought about the night of the repossession, the conference room confrontation, and the internet strangers who had debated my soul. I stopped by a railing and admitted the truth to the dark water, backed into a corner I had learned to bite. I couldn't unknow the version of myself who was capable of threatening her own parents with a collections letter. I had to live with her now. She was a part of me, the part that survived. I reflected on the myths I had been raised on, the American values that had been twisted to keep me in line. For years I thought resilience meant taking whatever your family dished out and smiling through the bruise. Now I knew resilience was the ability to say no and survive the fallout. I used to think community was the neighbors who gossiped while watching a tow truck. Now I knew it was the friends who brought takeout when you couldn't stop shaking. I had been taught that personal freedom was selfishness, but standing there in the cold, I realized it was simply the hard, necessary right to step out of a role that was killing you. My version of those values meant never again letting anyone, family, or not, define my worth in dollars. Sometimes late at night, I imagine a future confrontation. I picture a knock at my door years from now. I see my parents and Tyler standing there older, worn down by life, stripped of their arrogance. No cameras, no conference rooms, just them. I imagine them saying they were wrong. I imagine them asking if what they broke can ever be mended. In my head, the scene plays out a dozen different ways. Sometimes I slam the door, sometimes I listen, sometimes I sit them down and calmly read out the full ledger of harms on all sides, forcing them to hear every line item of pain they caused. I don't know which ending I would choose. The uncertainty is the only legacy they left me. On my way home, I passed a car dealership window at dusk. Rows of shiny trucks sat under garlands of lights, the reflections of Christmas decorations ghosting in the glass. I paused, seeing my own reflection superimposed over the metal and chrome. I saw the ghost of the girl they once assumed would always pay the girl who would set herself on fire to keep them warm. She was gone. They tried to erase me and send me the bill for the privilege. So I bought the debt and made them pay every cent themselves. Some people say I went too far. Some say I finally drew a line. If the day comes when my family shows up, not with another invoice, but with an apology, do I let them back in? Or leave the door closed? Leah finally found her peace in the silence, proving that sometimes the price of freedom is the only bill worth paying. What would you have done in her position? Would you have kept the door open or bought the debt like she did? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more. We read every single comment of your thoughts. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.